Throw your things away tonight, we'll go a different way, you and me. Tell your friends that this might take some time and you'll be back another day. I can see us breaking down the barrier. Oh yeah. With the speed of light we cross the stratosphere. Oh yeah. We can go so far, so far away. Baby, let's go far, so far, you and me. Let's dance the night away, we're locked together far away, you and me. We'll have a celebration to an unknown destination, can't you see? I can see us breaking down the barrier. Oh yeah. With the speed of light we cross the stratosphere. Oh yeah. We can go so far, so far away. Baby, let's go far, so far, you and me.
Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about 7 factors a personal injury attorney evaluates when looking at your case. I want you to understand that we have standards. We have things that we have to follow in order to do what we need to do on your behalf. So when we're looking at these things, it's not usually black or white. There's usually like factors, and it's going to be more gray. And the more gray it is, the more difficult it is. And we'll talk about those things. So I just want to preface this by saying that it is contrary to popular belief, there are no such things as slam dunk cases. There are better cases than others, and we'll talk about those things. But so when you're talking with a personal injury attorney, just because one personal injury attorney evaluates it a certain way doesn't mean that another personal injury attorney won't evaluate it a different way. So we're going to talk about that as well. If you're new here, my name is Taylor Darcy from Think Legal, where I help people and businesses thrive. I go live Monday through Friday at 11 right now. So please feel free to join me to get your questions answered. That's what I'm here to do. And I look forward to helping you. If you can't, make sure to leave comments below. Catch it on the replay. I understand not everybody can make it. Leave comments below. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have within reason. And let's get started, shall we? All right. So the very first thing that we look at when we are evaluating a case is liability. Who's liable? Are there more than one person or entity that's potentially liable? So don't look at it as we will evaluate all of those things. And so we will talk about, for instance, under the doctrine of what's called respondeat superior, which is vicarious liability. An employer can be liable for the actions of an employee if the action is done within the scope of employment. So it's a fancy way of saying if you're involved in a car accident with someone who is at work or on their job working, then the employer may be liable as well. So when we're looking at these case factors, right, we're looking at where, and we'll talk about this one in more detail, but where the money can come from, who is liable, because if there's no clear liability, number one, that's harder for us to evaluate case-wise. And then two, if there's a third party that's potentially liable, that can affect what we're asking for in damages and who we're asking the damages from, okay? So the first thing is liability. Who's liable for what the bad thing that happened to you was, right? So the next thing is the extent of your damages. I've talked about this in other videos, but it's worth mentioning and talking about. If you have minor back pain, and I'm not trying to say that it's not, everybody's pain is different, not trying to minimize your pain, but it's not the same pain as someone who lost a limb or is a quadriplegic or a paraplegic or has a traumatic brain injury. So all of these things go into what we're doing to evaluate the case. So I don't want you to think that it's just one thing or another thing. It's all of these things combined. So when you're thinking of this and you're talking with your attorney, it's important that you are as forthcoming and forthright as possible, because that can greatly impact how your case is handled, if it's taken at all, okay? Because we have a responsibility to our clients that means we have to do a vigorous representation of you, which, long story short, means that no matter what case we take, we have to do our best, right? We have to make sure that you get the representation that you deserve. And if we can't do that, we should decline a case. So if there's a case where if it's beyond our scope and we don't believe that we can achieve the necessary skill or knowledge that we need to take the case, we should decline and allow you to go somewhere that does have that. Now, If it's close, then that's different. But keep these thoughts in mind. It isn't as simple as, okay, I'm hurt, I need money, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So the extent of your damages. If we're just talking property damage, it's different than if we're talking bodily injury. Not because your property doesn't have value, but from a cost perspective, like insurance companies don't have to put out as much money for property damage as they do for bodily injury. Because if you have a traumatic brain injury, which is terrible as that is, it's going to require more care or additional care that you don't have if it's just a property damage claim, okay? So these are all things that are talked about. So what's the extent of your damages? It can range very lightly to some minor bumps and bruises and scrapes. And again, not trying to say that that doesn't mean you're not entitled to compensation, but how can we get you the most that you can? Or does it make sense in some instances to not hire an attorney because of the amount of damages that you have, right? Like there's not enough in the pie to warrant having an attorney take a third of that, depending on your situation. Okay, so that's next, the extent of your damages. Next is financial outcomes. What is it that you're looking to achieve? When are you looking to achieve it? And we'll talk more about these in detail, but you know what? Keep in mind that the purpose of being compensated for your damages are not to get rich, not to have live your life in the lap of luxury after your accident. Okay, the purpose of damages is to put you in a position had that accident not happened. Now, I will caveat that even a little bit more. It's to get you as close as possible to the damages that you would have had. So when you're putting it in that perspective, this is something that we're going to evaluate. Are we going to be able to contribute adequately to getting those damages on your behalf? Or are there not enough damages to justify our involvement, especially when we're talking 20 to 40%, depending on the case, so on and so forth. So those need to be discussed. Those need to be talked about. And a good personal injury attorney is going to sit down and evaluate all of these factors with you based on the specifics of your case, okay? The next thing they're going to evaluate are or were there possible bad acts on your part, okay? What do I mean by that? Okay, if two parties are speeding, right, so you're breaking the law, right, then just because the other party hit you doesn't mean you are relieved of your responsibility to not be speeding, okay? You did something bad, right? You sped. Now, you didn't hit the person, so that's not your fault, right? Like, that's not your fault. But speeding contributed to the damages, right? Like, if you would have been going the speed limit, then you would have had less damages. So you contributed to the damages. And so we're going to evaluate that and say, okay, if you're so much at fault that can negatively affect your damages, then that lowers how much we're able to obtain for you, right? Because your actions contributed to that. As I've talked about in other videos, and this makes perfect sense, courts do not like unjust enrichment, and they don't like putting the fault on someone who wasn't completely 100% at fault. Were they more at fault because they did something that hit you? Yeah, absolutely. But they were not, but you also contributed. It's also called contributory negligence in that world. But you did something that hurt your case, okay?
How we end up.
So, since you might have contributed to it, that affects how we're able to proceed, right? If two people are equally at fault, then it's possible you might not get back any of your damages. That's a harsh truth. that nobody that's on the receiving end of something bad that happens wants to hear, but that's a reality. That's a truth, right? Is that fair to the other party? Yeah, right? Like courts don't like unfair. And so if we're talking about your case, we need to evaluate that. We need to look at that and say, yeah, you hurt your case, okay, by doing those actions. All right. Next is, have you done anything to mitigate your damages? You have a responsibility to not make your damages worse, right? Like if your car is damaged, okay, and driving on it would then cause it more damage, then you can't drive on it because now all of a sudden the other party shouldn't have to pay for the damage that you cause. Again, this is a harsh truth, right? You can't just continue to damage the property that the other party damaged and then expect to be made whole on that. So they will reduce the amount of damages by your what's called failure to mitigate. And so this is, again, these are all things that we evaluate when we're looking at a personal injury case. The next is, do you have any prior relevant injuries? What do I mean by that? If you have had spinal surgery due to a previous accident, and now you've got additional damages, they're not going to give you from the entirety of the previous. It's only going to be the additional from the cause of the bad thing that happened currently. Okay, so if you had to have spinal cord surgery previously, they're not going to say, oh, this is going to give you more money to fix that issue, right? So you have to consider that when they're looking at damages, how does that affect your case? Again, that reduces your damages. Is there, if potentially, right? So prior relevant injuries. Now, that being said, if there's an injury that's not relevant, right? If there's an injury that has nothing to do with your current set of injuries, that can be put out. But the defense is going to use that as an opportunity of saying, well, wait, we're not liable. Or if we are liable, we shouldn't have to pay the full damages because of this thing. So that's where your attorney is going to come in and tell you that they're going to have to fight a little bit more for that. Okay, so prior relevant injuries. The next thing we're going to be talking about is your finances. Insurance companies will do all sorts of fun stuff to get you to settle quickly. Okay, especially if they're sniffing. They'll either delay, okay, if it's severe, or try to get you to lowball you if it's not as severe. Their goal is to pay as little as humanly possible. That is what insurance companies do. So when you put it in context of that nature, they'll do whatever it takes to pay as little as possible. So they'll delay if they need to, or they'll hurry up and settle so that if there's additional damages, or they think there's going to be additional damages, they're not responsible for those additional damages. So it depends. It depends on your situation. So if you can be patient with your case, will almost always, okay, almost always, not always, but almost always, end better for you than if you're in a hurry. If you have a way of surviving, because court cases can take a while. Somebody commented on one of my videos that they were talking about 6 years. Now, in California, you have 5 years from the date of something being filed for a case to be brought to trial. So it depends, right? Every jurisdiction's different, case is different. All of these things are different. So you cannot look at this and say, oh, well, my brother got this because of that. So the quicker you need money, which I understand, it's difficult, right? This isn't to say that everybody has the money to sit back, relax, and wait till they can get their settlement to be patient, right? So your situation is going to be different. So if you need to settle, that's understandable, but the insurance company is going to use that as a way to pay you less, okay? If you can be patient, and I mean, you know, not just you as a person, but you financially, then you're more likely to get a better settlement out of the matter. If you can't, understandably, but that will affect your settlement. So that's it. Those are the main 7 factors that we look at when we're talking about a personal injury case. Is this everything that we're going to evaluate? No. There's lots of different factors that we look at, but this is the top. These are the things, those are the big ones that we look at when you're discussing your case with us. Most importantly, know this. And I want you to be I want to be very clear on this one. People that are personal injury attorneys, people that want to fight for you, contrary to media and contrary to what other people will portray them as, are good, decent people that want you to get the help that you need, the compensation you deserve for the bad thing that happened. Okay? Be very clear on that. Most of them are. That doesn't mean all of them are. Just like there are good doctors and bad doctors, there are good lawyers and bad lawyers. And that's a truth. It's an unfortunate truth, but it is a truth. Not every doctor cares about helping you get better. I personally have been on the receiving end of that. I've had a doctor that harmed me greatly and didn't care. He completely disregarded how I felt about the situation. I was relatively certain I was going to die, and I didn't. But the point is he didn't seem to care. Oops was his overall take. I tell you that because every attorney is going to be different. If one attorney doesn't give you the good feelings, then find a different attorney that does. But just keep in mind that most of us that work in plaintiffs' personal injury work want you to get the treatment that you deserve. We love going to fight for you, right? We love being the advocate for you. Most of us, not all of us. So keep that in mind as you're dealing with these things. As painful as they are, your attorney is truly on your side, and we will advocate for you to get the treatment you deserve to be compensated fairly for the injuries that you have, not that somebody else has, that you have. So keep these thoughts in mind. All right. If you've gotten value out of this video, don't forget to subscribe and like and hit that bell icon. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one.